I have told a lot of lies in my life and most of them I can live with. The one I cannot is the paper I signed in a tin-roofed operations hut on the worst week of a wet season, the paper that asked the command to remove a soldier from my team before we ever left the ground. I signed it in a clean hand, I dated it, I believed every word. 9 days later I would have crawled across broken glass to take it back, and there was no taking it back, because by then the only reason I was alive to want to was the woman whose name I had written on it. Let me tell it the way it happened, because if I skip ahead you will think I was a fool from the start, and I was not a fool. I was something worse, I was certain. We were 8, we had been 8 for a long time, long enough that the number meant something to us the way a wedding ring means something. 8 men who had bled into the same dirt on 3 continents and learned each other down to the small things, who took his coffee black, who hummed without knowing it when the shooting started, who you put on the long gun and who you put on the door. There is a kind of trust you cannot manufacture and cannot explain to anyone who has not lived it. It is not affection, exactly. Affection is too soft a word. It is the certainty that the man on your left will be where he is supposed to be when the world comes apart, and that he will die before he leaves you to face it alone. We had that. We had earned it the only way it can be earned, which is slowly and at cost. Then a slot opened. Holloway took a piece of a bad day in a place I will not name, and they sewed him back together and told him his legs were done with this line of work, and we lost a man we loved. A team carries an open seat the way a body carries a wound. You can fight with it, you do not want to. The command sent us a name to fill it. The name was a woman. I want to be honest about what went through me when I read the assignment order, because honesty is the whole point of telling this. I did not think, here's a chance to learn something. I thought, here it is. I had been hearing for 2 years about pressure from above, about quotas, about the way the brass had started caring more how a team photograph looked than how the team shot, and here was the proof of it dropped on my desk with a signature block. I thought they had reached down into our open wound and stuffed it with a political bandage. I thought a good unit was being made to bleed so somebody in a clean uniform 1,000 miles away could check a box and feel good about himself at a dinner. I did not think any of that quietly. I said it. I said it to the team in the hut that first night, with the rain coming down so hard on the tin it was like sitting inside a drum, and the men nodded, because they had been thinking it too and had only been waiting for the senior man to say it out loud. They didn't send us an operator, I told them, they sent us a press release. Salazar laughed. Prout, who was the youngest of us and the loudest, said something I will not repeat about what the slot was really for. The rest just looked at the floor and let it sit. Reyes, who was the quietest and the oldest after me, said nothing at all, which I should have noticed, because Reyes saying nothing usually meant Reyes disagreed and was too smart to fight about it yet. I told them the plan. The plan was simple. We were 3 weeks out from a deep job, the kind where you go in light and far and there is no cavalry, and I was not going to take an unknown into that on the word of a personnel office. I would file to have her pulled and replaced from inside the community, a man we knew, a man we had worked with. Until that came through, we would brief her on nothing that mattered. She could carry a ruck and learn the radios and stay out of the way. We would keep our real plans, our fallbacks, our rally points among the 8 who had earned them. If the paper came through, no harm done. If it did not, well, we would carry her the way you carry dead weight, and we would survive it, and afterward I would burn the place down with letters until they never did this to us again. That was the plan I made. I made it before I ever laid eyes on her. I want that on the record too. I judged her and sentenced her before she said a single word to me, and I called my prejudice professionalism and the men called it leadership, and we all felt very clear-eyed and hard about it, the way you do when you are about to be wrong on a scale you cannot imagine. She came in the next morning. I had built a picture in my head and she did not match it, which annoyed me because I had wanted her to match it. I had wanted someone soft, someone who would flinch when we were rough, someone whose presence would prove my point for me by falling apart. What walked into the hut was a woman maybe a few years younger than me, built lean and low to the ground, with the kind of forearms you get from years of carrying weight you did not put down when you were tired. Her hair was cut short and going gray at the temples, and she had not done anything to hide it. Her face was weathered the way a fence post is weathered, all the soft worn off it by sun and wind, and her eyes, when they went around the room, did not ask anything of any of us. They just took us in, one at a time, the way you read terrain. She had a quiet about her that I did not like because I could not get under it. Her name was Diane Cobb. She gave it once flat, and then she stood at a kind of ease that was not quite at ease and waited. I did the thing you do, I made her wait some more. I finished a conversation with Prout about nothing, let the silence stretch, let her stand there. She stood there. She did not shift her weight or clear her throat or try to fill the quiet, which were the small tells I was watching for and did not get. After a while I turned to her and looked her over slow and said, "You know what we do here." "I have an idea," she said. You have an idea, I let that hang. The men were grinning, most of them. We go where it's bad and there's nobody coming for us, we don't carry passengers. I know, she said. She did not say it like a challenge and she did not say it like an apology. She said it like a weather report. The sky is gray today, there is nobody coming for us. Tell me your background, I said, and I made it sound like I was doing her a favor letting her speak at all. She told me a version of it. It was a clean record, a long one, but it was the kind of record that is too clean, the kind where the interesting parts are blacked out or simply absent, the kind a personnel office produces for someone whose real work does not go in the open file. She had been a lot of places. She had done a lot of training. None of it was anything I could grab onto and weigh, and so I weighed it as nothing, because a man who has decided what he wants to find will read an empty space as proof of empty rather than proof of a door he is not cleared to open. Sounds like you've done some courses, I said, and a couple of the men laughed. She did not flush, she did not look down, she looked at me with those level eyes and said, yes, some courses. I should have heard it then, the steadiness of it. A passenger gets angry when you insult them or they get small. She did neither. She just stood in it, calm as still water, and let me say what I was going to say. I told myself her calm was dullness. I told myself a sharp person would have fought back. I have learned since then that it is the opposite, that the people who do not need to win the small fights are the ones who have won the large ones, but I did not know it yet, and I taught her nothing that day and learned nothing, and I filed my paper that afternoon. I want to be careful here not to make myself the only villain because the men were with me and the men were good men. That is the part that is hard to hold. It was not cruelty. It was a kind of love twisted the wrong way. They loved the team and they were afraid of anything that might weaken it, and fear dressed up as standards looks exactly like standards until the day it gets someone killed. We froze her out. We ran our rehearsals and gave her the edges of them. We talked our real fallbacks in low voices at the back of the hut where she was not invited. We let her carry the heaviest ruck on the conditioning hikes and watched to see if she would crack. And when she did not crack, when she walked the whole route under a load that had two of the younger men gray-faced, we told ourselves she was just stubborn, and stubborn is not the same as good. Reyes came to me on the fourth night. I was cleaning my weapon by lamplight and he sat down across from me and worked the action on his own a few times before he spoke, which was his way. You watch her hands, he said. Whose? Cobb's when she works the gun. What about them? He thought about it. Reyes always thought about it. Nothing, he said finally. That's what, there's nothing extra, no wasted motion, you only get that one way. You get it from 1,000 hours on a square range, I said. Doesn't mean she's ever done it for real. Reyes looked at me a long moment and then he went back to his weapon and did not say anything else, and I told myself I had won the argument. I had not won the argument. I had only ended it, which a senior man can always do and which is not the same thing. The paper did not come through in time. The command sat on it, the way command sits on everything, and the window for the job opened, and I stood in front of my team the night before insertion with 9 of us in the hut instead of 8, and I made the worst decision of my life, which was to take her anyway and keep treating her like ballast. I should have either fought to ground the whole mission until I had a man I trusted, or I should have brought her all the way in and made her one of us. Instead I did the coward's middle thing. I brought her body and left her out of our minds. I gave her a sector and a radio and a load, and I did not give her the fallbacks, the rally points, the real plan under the plan. The 8 of us knew where to run if it all came apart. She did not. I told myself if it came apart we would shepherd her along. I told myself a lot of things that night. We went in before dawn into the Delta. I have to make you see the Delta because the Delta is the second character in this story, and what she did she could not have done anywhere else, and none of us could have lived through it without her precisely because of what kind of place it was. It was the mouth of a great brown river where it broke apart into 100 channels before it reached the sea, a flat drowned country with no hills and no horizon you could trust, all of it laced with old dikes and canals and the stilted bones of villages, half of it underwater in the wet season and the other half just waiting its turn. The monsoon was on us. The rain came in walls. The water did not stay where you left it. A channel you could wade at dusk was over your head by dawn, and a road that ran dry on the map was a river in the rain, and the only solid ground was the dikes and the village mounds, and everyone who lived there and everyone who fought there knew the dikes and the mounds, which meant the dikes and the mounds were where you died. The job, the actual job, does not matter to this story, and I will not detail it. We went in to do a thing and the thing went wrong, the way things go wrong, not through any one man's failure but through the simple grinding arithmetic of bad luck and a thinking enemy. What I will tell you is that within a day of touching down, our extraction was blown, our communications back to higher were a wall of dead static under the storm, and a force a great deal larger than us had closed a ring around the patch of drowned ground we stood on and begun methodically with no hurry at all to crush it inward. They had us. They knew the ground. They had the numbers. The water was rising, and the sky was on the deck so nothing was flying, and we were 9 people on a shrinking island of mud with a long, long way to the only place we might get pulled out. A fishing landing on the seaward edge of the delta the planners had marked as a last resort point, 9 days of walking through the worst country on earth if the worst happened. The worst had happened. I gathered the team on the first bad night in the gutted shell of a village house, the floor a foot deep in cold water, the rain a roar, and I laid out our situation and I watched my men's faces in the red light and I saw something I had only seen a few times in many years, which is the look of good soldiers who have done the math and do not like the answer. We were not going to be able to fight our way straight out. There were too many of them and they held all the high ground which in the delta meant the dikes, the only paths a man could move on. To use the dikes was to walk into their guns. To leave the dikes was to drown in the channels or bog in the paddy. There was no good way, there was barely a bad way. I was working through the bad way out loud, plotting a route on the dikes that I knew in my gut was going to get half of us killed, when Cobb spoke for the first time since we had gone in. She had said almost nothing the whole insertion, just done her job in her sector clean and quiet, and I had half forgotten she was there, which was exactly how I had wanted it. "We don't use the dikes," she said. I looked at her, so did everyone. "There's nothing else," I said. "You walk off the dikes, you're in the channels, we've got wounded gear, we've got the weight, half this team can't swim a kilometer of moving water in the dark with a ruck and you know it." "We don't swim it," she said, "we walk it at the slack." "The what?" "The slack water." She crouched down in the flooded room and pressed her palm flat to the surface of the moving water on the floor and held it there like she was listening to it through her hand. "This is tidal all the way up to where we are, maybe past. The sea pushes the river back twice a day and then lets it run twice a day. Right now it's running out fast, that's why everything's deep. But twice a day for about 40 minutes it stops, right at the turn before it floods back. At the slack the channels go shallow and slow and a man can wade most of them with a ruck if he knows which ones, and he leaves no wake, no sound, because there's no current to fight. We move at the slacks off the dikes in the channels where they'd never put a man because they don't believe anyone would. We hole up on the mounds in between. It's slow. It's 9 days maybe. But they'll be hunting us on the high ground and we'll be in the low ground under their feet, and they won't find us because to find us they'd have to think like someone who isn't afraid of the water." There was a silence in that flooded room that I can still hear, the rain on the broken roof and 9 people not breathing. "And how?" I said, and I made my voice as flat and cold as I could because I felt something moving under me and I did not want it to. "Do you know when the slack is?" She looked at me, and for the first time there was something in her face that was almost gentle, almost like she was sorry for what she was about to make plain to me. "Because I've been reading the water since we landed," she said. "The level on that doorpost every hour, the rack line on the dikes, the way the reeds lie. I have the last 2 turns timed to within 10 minutes and by tomorrow I'll have it to 5. The next slack is in 4 hours and 20 minutes and it'll last about 35. If we're moving in the channels by then, we make the first mound before the flood comes back. If we sit here arguing, we don't." I did not know what to say. I want to be a man who tells you I made the right call right then, and I did make the right call, but I did not make it cleanly. I made it because I had nothing else, and a part of me, a small part I did not want to admit was there, had started to be afraid she was right. I gave the order to move her way. I gave it grudging and hard, and I made sure my voice carried that I was choosing the only option left and not following her. And she let me have that, the same way she had let me have everything, and we went down off the dike into the black water at the slack, and she led. She led from the front, in the worst place, feeling the bottom ahead of us with a long reed she had cut, finding the firm spine of the channel and waving us onto it one by one with hand signals. I learned to read in the dark before that first night was over. Where the bottom turned to sucking silt that would have swallowed a man, she found the harder line along the old submerged dike crowns. Where current still ran, she put the strongest of us upstream of the weakest. She moved 9 loaded people, 3 of them carrying gear they should not have had to carry, across 2 kilometers of drowned country in the dark, in 35 minutes, and not one of us made a sound a sentry could have caught at 50 meters. And when the flood came roaring back up the channels behind us, we were already on a village mound, wet to the chest alive, with the enemy's lights moving along the high dikes a kilometer off. hunting a team that had simply ceased to exist as far as the high ground was concerned. I lay in the mud on that mound with my heart going, and I did not say anything to her. I should have, the smallest thing. I said nothing. I told myself we had gotten lucky, even then. That was day 1. I am not going to give you all 9 days hour by hour because no one could bear it and neither could I, but I am going to give you enough that you understand it was not luck. That there was never any luck in it, that what I had filed a paper to remove from my team was the single most complete soldier I have ever stood beside, and that I spent the better part of those 9 days having my certainty taken from me one piece at a time, like a man being undressed in the cold. By day 2 we understood the rhythm she had given us. 2 slacks a day, the dark one's best. Move in the channels at the turn of the tide, hole up on the mounds through the running water in the daylight, eat cold, sleep in shifts in the mud. She had it timed by then not to 10 minutes but to 5, and she never missed a turn, never once, across 9 days, reading a tide table out of the water itself with no instrument but her own attention. The men noticed. You could not notice. Prout, who had said the ugly thing about her the first night, started watching her hands the way Ray's had told me to, and I saw the moment the laughter went out of his face for good. On day 2 she also saved Salazar's life, and she did it so quietly that Salazar did not know until later it had been saved. We were holed up on a mound in the heat of the day, and Salazar, who was a good man but quick, wanted to top off our water from a clean-looking inlet on the seaward side, and he was halfway to it before she spoke. She did not shout. She never shouted, not once in 9 days, and I came to understand that her quiet was a weapon, that a voice that never rose meant that when she spoke at all you stopped, and listened the way you do not for a man who is always loud. "Not that one," she said. Salazar stopped. "It's clear." "It's clear because it's salt," she said. "The rack on those reeds is dead white. It's been killed back by the sea. That inlet's tidal to the brine. You'll drink it and you'll cramp, and then you'll be no good to anyone for a day we don't have." She nodded at a muddier seam in the ground 100 meters the other way, an ugly brown trickle nobody would have looked at twice. "There, the reeds are green and the frogs are calling. That's getting fresh water off the paddies behind. Filter it through your shirt and it'll keep you." Salazar drank from the ugly trickle and it kept him, and by the 3rd day the men had stopped doing anything in that country without first looking to see what she thought of it, and I had not. I made a point of not. I was the senior man and I would not be seen to defer to ballast, and the smaller and pettier this looks to you now the more accurately you are seeing it. It broke open on day 4, and it broke open because of me. I made a mistake. The senior man made the mistake, not the filler, and that is its own kind of justice. We were crossing at the dark slack and I was running the rear, the most dangerous slot, and I let my mind get ahead of my feet because I was tired and proud and angry at being tired, and I came off the firm line she had marked and into the silt, the deep sucking silt she had spent 4 days teaching all of us to read, and I went into the waist before I knew it, and then the flood started early. It did not, it started exactly on time. She had called the window and I had stretched it because I was the great Wade Mercer and the tide would surely wait for me, and the water came up the channel in a brown wall and I was stuck fast with a ruck on my back and a rifle in my hands and 40 seconds to live. I did not call out, I will tell you the truth. I did not call out because even drowning I did not want her to be the one. That is what I had become, a man who would rather die than be saved by the soldier he had judged. She came back for me anyway. She had counted heads at the far bank the way she counted heads every single time, every slack 9 days, and she was short one, and she came back down the rising channel in the dark against the flood alone with a length of line off her own ruck, and she got to me as the water came up under my arms, and she did not waste a breath on what a fool I was. She drove the cut reed into the firm bottom beside me, anchored the line to it, looped it under my arms, and then she did the thing that I think about more than anything else from those 9 days. She did not pull. A weaker soldier, a frightened one, would have hauled on me and we would have both gone in. She knew the silt. She talked to me low, while the water rose, told me to stop fighting, to let my legs go soft, to lean back slow onto the line and let the water that was trying to kill me float the weight off the mud. And as the flood came up it lifted me, the same flood, and she walked backward up the firm line, drawing me out of the silt an inch at a time on the back of the very tide I had insulted, and she had me on hard bottom and moving before the channel was over my head, and we made the mound, the last 2. Soaked and shaking, with the men's hands reaching down to pull us up. I lay there, she crouched beside me getting her own breath back, and she still did not say anything about what I was, and that was when it finally went through me all the way, the thing I had been holding off for 4 days. It was not gratitude, not first. First it was shame, the deep, clean, burning shame of a proud man who sees exactly what he is, and gratitude only came after, walking behind the shame the way it should. "Why'd you come back?" I said. My voice did not work right. I'd have filed it again. She looked at me in the dark and the rain. I know you filed it, she said. There was no heat in it. I read the order the day I processed. You think they don't show us? It landed like a blow. She had known. The whole time, every cold day, every rehearsal she was kept out of, every hike under the heavy ruck, every fallback whispered behind her back, she had known I had moved to throw her away, and she had carried the heaviest load and timed the tides and saved Salazar and come back into a flooding channel against the current to pull me off the bottom by the back of the same tide I refused to respect, knowing all of it. Then why? I said. Because you're on my team, she said, simple as that, as if it were the only fact in the world that mattered and all the rest were weather. I don't get to pick who's on it, neither do you, turns out. And there was, just for a second, the ghost of something dry at the corner of her mouth, and then it was gone, and she stood up and went to count the watch. You're on my team, not you're on the team. My team. She had decided we were hers from the first day, mine and the 7 others who had frozen her out, and she had been quietly, completely responsible for us ever since, the way I had thought only the 8 of us could be responsible for each other, and she had asked nothing back, and she had not even told us she was doing it. I changed on that mound. Not all at once. A man does not undo years in a night, but the keel of me came over, and it stayed over, and everything after is the story of the rest of us catching up to what Ray's had seen in her hands on the 4th night in the hut, and I had refused to see for far too long. I started to lead the way you are supposed to. I went to her. In front of the men in the light, I went to her and asked her read of the ground before I gave an order, and the first time I did it I saw the team straighten up, all of them like a sail filling, because a team takes its shape from the senior man, and when the senior man stops fighting reality, the whole team stops fighting it too. From day 5 we moved as 9 instead of 8, and a problem, and the difference was the difference between a fist and a hand with the fingers spread. And the enemy began slowly to understand that something was wrong. They had expected to crush us against the sea in 2 or 3 days. By day 5 we should have been dead or pinned and broken on the high dikes where they could get at us, and instead we had simply dissolved. They could not find the bodies and they could not find the team, and a thinking enemy, when its arithmetic stops working, gets careful and then gets angry, and they did both. They started working the channels. They put men in the low ground for the first time, wadding the inlets at the slacks, trying to think the way she had taught us to think. It was the most dangerous turn the whole thing took, because the one place we had been safe was the place they had refused to go, and now they were coming into it. She had seen it coming a day before it came, of course she had. They'll be in the water by tomorrow's dark slack, she told me on the night of day 5, the 2 of us low on the lee side of a mound while the team slept in shifts. They've stopped finding us on the high ground, and they're not stupid. So we change, we stop running from them in the channels, and we start using the channels against them. How? She laid it out, and I am going to tell you this part carefully. Because this is the part where the legend I did not yet know about began to stand up out of the woman in front of me, and where the proof stopped being survival and started being the thing this kind of story is really about, which is one soldier turning the whole weight of a situation over with nothing but her own competence. She did not propose that we ambush them. Ambush in that country was a coin flip, and we could not afford a coin flip. We had no men to lose, and she would not spend one. What she proposed was geometry. She had read the whole delta in 5 days the way I read a paragraph. The rise and fall of every channel at every stage of the tide, which inlets went dry and when, which mounds were islands at the flood and peninsulas at the slack, the way the water moved the entire battlefield twice a day on a schedule only she was keeping. She proposed that we let them follow us into a particular maze of channels she had chosen, a fan of inlets around a low mound, and that we time our movements so that we crossed at the very front of the slack the earliest possible minute, while they, not having her clock, would still be coming in behind us as the tide turned. And then the tide would turn. The flood would come back up those channels fast, the way it had nearly killed me, and it would catch them in the deep silt and the rising water in the dark, strung out and committed, in the exact ground she had spent 5 days learning was a trap if you did not know the clock. We would not fire a shot, she said. We did not need to, the delta would do it, we only had to be gone. I asked her if she was sure. She looked at me, and there was that ghost of dryness again. I've been doing this longer than you've been on this team, she said. Yes, I'm sure. We did it on the dark slack of day 6, and it worked exactly the way she said it would to the minute, and I will not dress up what happened to the men who came into those channels behind us. The delta did what she said the delta would do. It was a terrible thing, and she took no joy in it, and neither did I. and afterward on the far mound with the flood roaring up the inlets behind us full of the enemy's confusion. She did not gloat, did not say a word about it, just counted 9 heads in the dark and turned to scan the next leg. And I understood that I was in the presence of a kind of soldier I had read about and told stories about and had genuinely believed did not exist anymore. The men understood it too. Something had shifted all the way over for all of us by then. Prut would have walked off a cliff if she had pointed at it. It was Reyes on day 7 who finally said the name. We were holed up through a long hot day on a mound within sound of the sea at last, the surf a low growl somewhere to the south through the rain, and we were close enough now to the extraction landing to let ourselves believe in it, 2 slacks out, maybe 3, and the men were quiet with the kind of hope that is almost worse than fear because it can be taken away. Reyes had been watching her sleep. She slept the way the rest of us could not, instantly and completely in any mud, the sleep of someone who had long ago made her peace with the next morning. He came over to me and he sat down and he was quiet for a long time even by Reyes's standards. I figured out who she is, he said finally. She's Cobb. No, he shook his head slowly. I mean who she is, you remember the strong point, the one they tell in the schoolhouse, years ago before our time on this team. The element that got cut off in the position that should have fallen in an hour and held for 2 days, and the cut-off element that got walked out across 30 kilometers of bad ground in the dark, every one of them alive, and nobody ever knew the operator who did it because the whole thing was black and the name never came out. They just gave the operator a word for it, a call sign. You remember the call sign. I remembered the call sign. Every one of us remembered the call sign. It was a story we told the way you tell a story about a saint, the kind of thing you half believe was made up, the standard you measured yourself against and fell short of and were comforted that no real person could meet it. Stillwater, I said. Reyes nodded. Watch her with the tides, he said. Watch her walk men through dead ground in the dark and not lose one. Watch her save the man who tried to throw her off the team. I'm telling you, they didn't fill our slot with a quota. They filled it with Stillwater and they couldn't tell us because Stillwater's still black and we sat there and laughed at her. I did not sleep that day. I want to be precise about why the name mattered because it is easy to think it mattered because it made her impressive and that is the small reason. The large reason is what it told me about her silence. Because if Reyes was right and I knew in my bones Reyes was right, I had been watching the proof of it for 7 days, then she was a legend who had let us treat her like trash. She had stood in that hut and let me say to her face that she was a press release, that she had only done some courses and she was the operator the schoolhouse named like a god, and she had not corrected me. She had not pulled rank she could not name or a record she was not cleared to show. She had simply absorbed it, all of it, the whole insult, and gone to work timing the tides that would save the lives of the men insulting her. And she had done it not to prove anything to us but because we were on her team and that was the only reason she needed. I had thought her silence was dullness, then I had thought it was discipline, now I understood it was something far past either. It was the deepest kind of strength there is, the kind that has nothing left to prove and therefore proves nothing and simply does the work. She did not need us to know she was Stillwater. She had been Stillwater on a mound at 3 in the morning with no one watching but the rain. The watching had never been the point. That had always been the difference between her and me, and I had had it exactly backward for 7 days, calling my need to be seen leadership and calling her refusal to be seen ballast. I did not tell her I knew. There was no need, and there would have been something almost insulting in it, as if knowing the legend were what finally made her worth respecting, when the truth was she had been worth all of it from the first wet morning. I just led the way she had taught me to lead by being herself, which was to go to the work and let the rest fall away. Days 8 and 9 were the hardest, and they were the hardest because we were close, and the enemy knew we were close, and the seaward edge of the delta where the extraction landing sat was a narrowing, a funnel, a place where the 100 channels braided back together toward the one mouth, which meant the low ground we had lived in began to run out, and we were going to have to come up at the end into the open, onto the last dike and across the last span of ground to the fishing landing in the daylight. Because the only slack that put us at the landing in time to make the extraction window, if the window was even still good, if Hire had even gotten the storm-broken word that we were coming, fell at first light on the 9th day. They knew it too. They had done their own arithmetic at last and they had stopped hunting the whole delta and concentrated everything they had left on the funnel, on the last mile, because they knew that wherever we were, we had to come through there, and they set up to kill us on the final ground the way I had once planned to walk us up onto the dikes to be killed on the first night. She gathered us on the last mound in the dark before the dawn of day 9 and she laid out the final move and I gave her the team to do it. I said it out loud in front of all of them, the thing I should have said on day 1. I said, Stillwater has the team for the breakout. I used the name. I watched it go through them, watched 7 men understand all at once what raise and I already knew, watched the last of it settle, and not one of them was surprised because they had all felt it for days. They had only been waiting for the senior man to say the true thing out loud, the same way they had once waited for me to say the false one. And she took us out. I'm not going to be able to make you feel that last morning the way it deserves, but I will try. The plan was hers and it was, like everything she did, not a gamble but a piece of clockwork built out of the only certainties available, which in that country were the water and the light. She used the last of the night's slack to put us not on the obvious dike where they were waiting, but in a final channel she had been saving. A deep tidal cut that ran almost to the landing and that anyone who knew the delta would have said was impassable at that hour. And it was impassable to anyone who did not have the turn timed to the minute and the bottom read in the dark. We went down into it at the absolute front of the slack, lower in the water than I would have believed a loaded man could go in live, and she walked us up it under the very feet of their position, so close we could hear them talking on the dike above us. 9 people moving through black water making no wake because she had put us in at the one dead minute when there was no current to make a wake, and we came up out of the cut into the gray first light, not in front of their guns but behind them. Between them and the landing on the right side of the trap, because she had not tried to break through their line at all, she had simply made their line face the wrong way. There was fighting at the end, I will not pretend there was not. They turned and there was a hard, short, ugly fight in the gray light on the last ground, and she ran it the way she did everything, low and quiet and exact, putting each man where the ground and the light gave him the advantage, spending bullets the way she spent words, never one wasted, and we broke through to the landing as the storm finally lifted enough for the birds to come, and they came low and loud out of the lightning sky, and we put 9 people on them, 9, every one of us. 3 wounded and all of us walking, and the last one onto the aircraft, the last one off that drowned ground after she had counted heads for the 18th time in 9 days and come up with 9, was Stillwater. We did not lose a man. 8 men who had wanted her cut, and an open slot filled by a soldier we had treated like a problem to be managed, and 9 days in the worst country I have ever fought in against a force that should have erased us in 3, and we did not lose a man, and there is exactly one reason for that, and her call sign is the thing the schoolhouse names like a god, and we laughed at her on the first night in a tin-roofed hut. The debrief came days later, after the wounded were seen to and we had slept and the world had started to feel solid again. It was the formal kind, the kind with a long table and clean uniforms and people from higher who had not been in the water, and at some point one of them turned to me, the senior surviving man, and asked with the team's open lead slot in mind who I would put forward to take it. Holloway's seat still open, the number that meant a wedding ring to us. Who got it? I had thought about what I would say for days. I want to tell you I agonized over it, but the truth is the opposite. The truth is it was the easiest thing I have ever said. I stood up. You do not have to stand up for that question, but I stood up because some things you owe a posture to. I said her name first, her real name, Cobb, and then because the room was cleared and the people at the table were the kind who would know what it meant, I said the other one. I said, and if any of you have read the file behind the file, you already know the call sign and you already know I have no business being asked this question with her in the room. She should have had the team the day she walked into that hut. I filed paper to have her removed. I was wrong in a way I will be making right for the rest of my career. Put her in the lead. I'll serve under her and count it the honor of my life, and every man who walked out of that delta will tell you the same, and the ones who can't speak yet will tell you when they can. There was a quiet at that table not unlike the quiet in the flooded house on the first night, and across the room Stillwater looked at me and she did the thing she had done in the channel when I asked her why she came back for me. The ghost of something dry at the corner of her mouth, no more than that. She did not need any more than that, she never had. I have thought a great deal in the time since about what she taught me, and I have decided it is not what you would expect. It is not that you should not judge a soldier by whether they look like the picture in your head, though that is true and I had to learn it. It is something underneath that. It is that the proving was never the point. I had spent my whole career believing that a man earned his place by being seen to be good, that the respect was the thing, the salute was the thing, the standing up at the table was the thing. And she had shown me across 9 days that none of it was the thing. The thing was the work done right, whether anyone ever knew. She would have timed those tides and walked us out exactly the same if the file behind the file had stayed black forever and we had gone to our graves still thinking she was a press release. She did not save us to be respected. She saved us because we were on her team. The respect, when it finally came, when a hard, proud fool stood up at a table and named her to lead, was not the reward she had been working toward. It was just the truth catching up at last to what she had been the whole time, on the mounds in the dark, with no one watching but the rain. She has the team now. I serve under her and it is the honor of my life, exactly as I said it would be. And on the bad nights, the ones where the rain comes down hard enough to sound like a tin roof, I think about the paper I signed and I am glad it is gone, not because it failed but because of what it failed to do. It tried to throw away the best of us. It tried, in a clean hand with a date with my name on it, to remove from the team the one soldier who would walk every one of us out of the drowned country alive. It did not get to. The tide came in and took it, the way the tide takes everything that does not understand the water. And the operator who understood the water better than anyone I have ever known is still here, still quiet, still going to the work and letting the rest fall away, and I follow her now gladly into whatever bad ground comes next. The man who tried to cut her, walking where she points, grateful past words that she decided, on a day I did not deserve it, that I was on her team.